Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Artistry House, the HQ of the British Institute of Professional Photography. And I'm very, very pleased that we've got one of our amazing members online at the moment, John Miskelly, who is an incredible landscape photographer, and we're going to do an interview with him very soon about his photography. But also, a lot of people probably don't know that he's a chartered accountant as well. Still very involved in that world, and he's offered to his services to our fellow members to answer some questions and maybe try and put a bit of daylight on the announcement yesterday about self-employed, but we're also going to cover a little bit on limited companies as well. So John, welcome, and thank you very much for doing this for us. It really, really is appreciated in this time of need.
No problem at all, Martin. Glad to help if I can.
Good. So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of step back a little bit to the announcements last week, because we seem to have in our membership kind of two camps, if you will. There's photographers who run the business as a small limited company with either them as the only employee, or maybe they have them and a other person. And then we've got sole traders. So if we can look at the limited companies and the announcement that was made last week, and how that process is going to work with what the government announced.
Yeah, I mean, last week was really support for employees, and it was on the back of the hospitality industry, leisure industries, pubs, etc., where vast numbers of employees were basically made redundant or laid off during this time, and the government had to step in to support that. And clearly that'll benefit our members. As you say, there are quite a number of them in limited companies. And what will happen is if you're an employee in your limited company and drawing a salary from that, you can actually, what they call, furlough yourself and take a step back from the business, and then you'll be entitled up to 80%, or sorry, you'll be entitled to 80% of your salary, up to £2,500 per month, and that can be backdated to the 1st of March. But I'm guessing, unless you've been sitting doing nothing since the 1st of March, it'll probably occur from sometime over the last week or two until such times as the government withdraw the scheme. I think it's about a 3-month scheme initially.
So just talking about the furloughing system for a second, so our member or whoever is running the company, they can furlough their staff and themselves, and they can do that at any time. And do you know the process for them to do that?
My understanding is a lot of this is still forming as we speak, but my understanding is that the online system with the HMRC for salaries and payroll will have a checkbox that you can tick for that. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but probably a search of the government website will bring that up fairly easily, and just go on board and do that. But the key thing to remember is if you do go onto a furlough type position, either yourself or employees, you cannot work. You need to step back from the business. So you can't say, I'm furloughed, a job came in to shoot a commercial shoot tomorrow for half a day, I'm going to do that and keep a low profile and hopefully nobody catches on. You can't do that. You need to be furloughed. Now, the government have stated that there is an option for people to go back off furlough again, but I wouldn't suggest you just do this, for a few hours here or there. It's more for people, if I use the example of a haulage firm, if they've kept a driver on who then becomes ill and they need to bring one of their staff back off furlough to cover that driver, they can be brought back for a week or whatever that might be, and then they can be placed back into furlough again after that. So that option apparently will be available.
Okay. I guess the other question there then as well is, if our member or the photographer is a limited company and he is the only employee and he is on the payroll, which he should be as a limited company, and to furlough themselves is okay, and they don't have to wind up the company or anything like that. It just kind of almost mothballs the company, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're basically saying you're stepping back. Now, I know some people have asked a question about if you're the sole director in the company. Because this is not totally clear, I personally don't think there's a problem with it, because if you're not working, you still remain a director.
Yes.
You do have director responsibilities, but those tend to be at certain times of the year in terms of producing accounts and doing certain legal things. Worst case scenario, and if you need to have a director, you may want to put your partner on, or a close friend, or somebody as a non-salaried director, just to have another name there, and you then totally step back. That might be a way around if you're a little bit nervous of that. But remember, all of this is still being formed in terms of exactly how it'll work. Yeah. The government have given a certain amount of guidance, but there are still gaps and holes in it. I'm looking at this sort of day and daily for a number of my clients, and they're coming up with very similar questions. And we're doing our best to answer them, but it's not a totally clear picture at the moment, Martin.
Okay. And I think that's very important to say that it's still a moving target, and you know, there's things coming out on the government website daily, even about things that they've announced 2 weeks ago. We're still getting the detail, which is changing. I guess the next question is, as somebody who also was self-employed for 10 years, and I know that a lot of our members probably pay themselves this way, is that as a limited company, they were probably paying themselves the £10,000, the kind of the maximum they can pay, and then paying themselves in dividends for the rest of that, for obviously for tax reasons and many other reasons. I think we have to make it clear that unfortunately, with this system, they'll only be eligible for the 80% on the £10,000 and not on any dividends that they pay themselves.
Yeah, whatever salary they pay themselves, it may well be more than 10,000, it might be less. The figure isn't really that relevant. It's more a case of it's only the salary element, it's not the dividend element. Having said that, over recent years, the inland revenue have reduced the benefits of dividend. I used to pay myself, I think it was £7,000 years ago, and take the rest of my salary in dividend. They've eroded that, if you like, because they saw that as a way to pay less tax. So at the moment, you can only pay, I think it's £2,000 per director in dividend. So it's maybe not the problem it would have been 5, 10 years ago, but for some people it may still be an issue. They may still pay their dividends because it suits them to do so, waiting until the end of the year to see what the profit is. And unfortunately, that's not covered by the government scheme.
Okay. As far as V18 Corporation Tax, I've seen a number of posts on different areas, people giving a lot of mixed messages. And just to confirm with you that the VAT is only deferred. They will have to pay it next year.
Yeah. The VAT that will be due at the end of this month, start of next week, is the end of the VAT quarter for most people, which would normally have been payable early May, 7th of May typically. That is now deferred until the end of June. So I'm guessing that they won't take that until the payment date for the end of June quarter, which would probably be 7th of August. Not totally clear, but it is a deferral. It is not we're not taking the VAT. Whenever I was traveling through Stansted last Friday, and one of the security staff said, "Oh, VAT has been cancelled." And whenever I checked it out, it wasn't quite as simple as that, unfortunately. But it is deferred, so it gives people a cash flow advantage. But please remember, you're going to have to pay that in the future. Having said that, if you get to the end of June and you're because you've not had earnings over the next quarter and you find it's a little bit difficult to pay your VAT, speak to HMRC. I was speaking to them earlier this week about PAYE for one of my other clients, and we actually quite easily got negotiated settlement to say we're not paying even PAYE for a period of time. But again, it's a deferral. It will have to be paid in the future, but the revenue will work with you. But don't ignore it. Don't sit on this and hope it'll go away. It's much easier to speak to them. They'll take a record of that. And then if you say you're going to do something in due course, follow up on that as well. But keep talking to them.
And is the deferral of the VAT, is that automatic as well? Or I mean, there may be some businesses or companies that have the money sat there and would rather get it done and paid, knowing that they're not going to have to pay that shit. I'm guessing that they still will be able to pay the VAT if they're in the able to.
It's a good question. You still have to do your VAT return. I don't think then the revenue will take your VAT off you. You would then have to go in and manually try and pay that, which I would imagine you could do if you chose to do so, but they will not automatically take that. What they have also said is if you're due a VAT refund for the quarter, refunds will still be paid. So if you're in that position, which I'm guessing not many people are, unless they've bought maybe some big capital items in the quarter, that will come into their bank account as per normal.
Okay. So I guess now to move on to self-employed or sole traders and the announcement yesterday. So, and just to be clear that I know that you've kind of had a look into this for us and very kindly of you to do that, but it is still quite vague, isn't it? What it actually means. We've got the broad strokes, but the devil in the detail, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So maybe you can explain how the 80% of profit, how that kind of works and how that would be calculated for sole traders.
Yeah, this is very, very new. It was only announced by the Chancellor last night, and the only information I'm able to find is actually the government website at the moment. Some of the newspapers have covered it, but they've also used, it looks like, the same source. So the information, even the government website, is quite limited. So I'm just going on what they've said there. But in simple terms, you take the average of your last 3 years, 3 tax years profit, not your turnover, your profit, and they will work out 80% of that up to a maximum monthly amount of £2,500, very similar to the salary scheme. And you will get that as a single grant. They're saying at the moment in June. Now, the infrastructure and the calculations to do this is much more complex than it is with the salaries with limited companies. So, while they say June, I don't know that that'll definitely happen. It might slip. I think because of the urgency of the situation and the fact of putting, a lot of businesses under pressure, they will work very, very hard to try and achieve that, and maybe try and do it a little bit earlier if they can. But you need to have your 3 years profit. One of the things that has come out that, as far as I can see, is that for people that are not trading for 3 years, you have to have completed a self-assessment tax return for, just checking the years here, 18-19. So 2018-19, you need to have completed a self-assessment tax return. And then you also need to be trading through 19-20 and still trading now. So that, to me, says that if you've been trading for 2 years, they will allow you to do this. And it's not just the 3 years. So for people that have been trading for a couple of years, but if you've just started trading in the last 6 months, as far as I can tell, you will not get this grant.
Okay, and I think it's also important to say that the Chancellor last night did say that they would extend the returns for another 4 weeks. So people who were due to do returns and they were late, they've extended that for another 4 weeks.
I would like to think most people have completed their tax return for 18-19. They should have had it done really by the end of the year because they would have paid their tax in January. If you haven't done that, they've actually given a bit of leeway to the 23rd of April. So the 23rd of April is the deadline. You must get your tax return in then, and you will still be included in this scheme. If you haven't got it in by then, I'm guessing it means you'll probably not be included in the scheme. So if you're in that position, either do your own tax return or speak to your accountant as a matter of urgency.
Okay. You were also explaining before we started recording as well that it may be that your business is made up of revenue from a couple of different businesses of yours, but under the same umbrella, and that has an impact on it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to have at least 50% of your profits to come from your self-employment. Now, these are profits of sole traders and partnerships. So this is, just to be clear, is excluding limited companies. So if you're a sole trader or a partnership, this applies. So if I'll pick an example, if your income, your trading income on your tax return was 50 grand a year, but that was made up of a number of different things. So let's say you had 20,000 of investment income. You maybe have some properties, commercial properties, and £30,000 was your photography business. Then you will qualify this because the 30,000 is more than 50% of your total tax return. On the other hand, if you've got a bigger portfolio of investment properties, or you have a part-time job working somewhere else, and your photography income was 20,000 out of your 50,000 total, you will not qualify for this. So in my case, as a good example, where I have a photography business, a landscape photography business, and a business consultancy business as well. Some years one is a bit more than the other, but at the moment I've been doing more consultancy work for the last year. I won't qualify for this scheme because my consultancy work is my limited company and my photography work is my sole trader. So I will fail to qualify for this grant myself.
Okay, very interesting. And also the maximum is £50,000 of profit. So if
right.
business you're generating more than 50, which I'll be honest, I think most of our members will fall below that. So.
Yeah, I think the Chancellor reckons about 95% of all business, of all sole traders and partnerships, are below 50,000 profit. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't a few of our members who might be working in a very profitable line of photography, and they're the lucky ones these days who won't qualify for this, but I think it'll affect or it'll benefit the majority of our members.
Okay. And just as a personal thought, your thoughts on this package for sole traders, you think it's they've done the right thing and they've gone far enough, and do you think it's generous, or do you think they need to do more?
Yeah, no, I think it is, because initially, if you recollect, up until now, people were entitled to universal credit, which I think is something like £94 a week.
Yeah.
As we all know, £94 a week doesn't go very far when you're trying to feed your family and pay your bills. So the government came under a lot of pressure in recent weeks to do something for those in the self-employed sector, and they've done so. And it's actually slightly more generous than a lot of commentators were indicating. People were talking about a £1,700 grant per month, whereas it's now £2,500. The difficulty with this is self-employment is a lot more complex because people tend to have income from various sources. It goes up and down every year, and HMRC or the Inland Revenue are going to have to calculate who's entitled to this, and that's quite a big job in itself. And remembering, and this is not a political comment, remembering that the country or the Prime Minister has talked about 330 billion being made available during the coronavirus outbreak. That's a huge amount of money for a country like the UK that we'll all be paying off in some way, shape, or form for years. So while I'm not saying it's perfect, no system or no grant making system, I guess, is ever perfect. The fact it's a grant, it could very easily have been structured as some sort of a loan that they would have clawed back through the tax system in years to come. The fact it's a grant is, I think, reasonably generous under the circumstances.
Yeah, and I'm watching the interview last night. Obviously, I watched it live as well with a vested interest. And one of the things that kept coming up by the reporters is, well, that's fine, but we've got to get through now till June until which then they'll get in a lump sum. But I think it's important to remember that obviously they have made provisions for people. They can suspend the mortgage payments for 3 months at the moment, and there is actually as much as none of us want to borrow money, and I'm sure that people have got a bit of debt already, but there's quite a lot of interest-free loans becoming available, and overdrafts, interest-free overdrafts as well. So I think it's worth bearing in mind that if you're in that situation where the next couple of months is going to be really, really tight, then you've just got to kind of read or investigate every option that the government has given us, and go out and do that.
Well, I spoke for another client of mine. I spoke to one of the councils outside London. I won't name them for obvious reasons, but whenever I spoke to them yesterday about suspending the rates on a number of business premises, they were very relaxed about that and said, just cancel your DDs, send us an email telling us what you've done. Because there's a backlog, it might take us a week to come back to you, but we're expecting a lot of this. And again, speaking to banks and lenders, some are better than others, to be honest, but most are being quite flexible. The one thing I would be cautious of is a coronavirus interest-free loan scheme that's been talked about, where you can borrow up to 5 million. And I'm sure not many members will be wanting to borrow quite that in quantum. But I was speaking to actually the bank this morning. I was speaking to NatWest this morning, and they said there's quite an onerous set of paperwork and cash flow forecasts and forms to be filled in for that. So that's probably not the right product for the smaller business. It's more medium and large businesses. But as you say, there are products out there. Some lenders are being quite supportive. Mortgage companies, again, some of them are being quite supportive as well. The thing I always say to people is, don't just cancel direct debits and bury your head in the sand. Always talk to your lender. If they know what you're doing and you're doing it in a transparent and open way, most of the time they'll work with you. When you do it and don't tell them what's happening, it's more likely to come back, because all of these things are only being deferred. That's a key point that people have to remember. People are not going to write this off. They're going to defer it. You're going to have to pay it back sometime. And it's better to do that in a structured way with good communication between you and the person you owe the money to.
Yeah, I think, John, if anybody kind of takes anything away from today and the amazing information that you've given us is communication. They've got to communicate with the banks, with the mortgage lenders, and HMRC. I know people are quite often frightened of communicating with HMRC.
I had one of the most pleasant, easiest calls with the HMRC earlier this week, and I've dealt with them on and off over the years as a chartered accountant, and I was pleasantly surprised how understanding and helpful they were. Yeah. And it was just a normal helpline. It wasn't a special line or anything like that. I got through to an advisor, and they've clearly been briefed, to work with people and help people as much as they can. And I think this is a case where, that's why I think this is a generally positive thing. I know some people will fall through the net. I realize there's criticism about the fact it's going to take until June for this to actually happen. But the fact that, I get a sense the whole country is actually starting to pull together. Yeah. The NHS applause last night at 8 o'clock. The number of people who were sending me messages, because we live in the country, so we can't go out onto the street and clap the way some people were. Yeah. And the videos and the pictures. I think there's a real sense of people trying to help each other, and particularly help older people and people that are more disadvantaged as well. And it's a difficult time for everybody. We're all going to struggle through this. Yeah. And I think that's where the Institute can try and help. by giving support like this and advice like this, and trying to support our members as much as we can.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I absolutely 100% about the NHS. My daughter's a radiographer, so she's frontline in the hospital, and she's in Cardiff. She lives in Cardiff, but where I live in the little cul-de-sac last night, to see the neighbours out like that supporting it was very moving, actually.
Yeah. No, I was surprised just how much support there was. Like, I've got a daughter who's in her final year of a nursing degree. And most students are being taken into hospitals a little bit early before the end of their degree. And people are just willing to do what they need to do. But I think there's a reawakening of respect for people that work often in industries we would have probably looked at as, the catering industry or the care industry or nurses or whatever. People who are often not that well paid. And I hope out of this, at the very end, people actually have a much deeper respect for people that maybe have been taken for granted in the past.
Absolutely.
That's my hobby horse done.
No, I'm exactly the same. One last thing before we kind of close the meeting. You've very kindly offered before we start recording that you would come on maybe on a weekly basis, and as the government put the detail into the plans, which we don't really have. We've just, as I said at the start, we've only got the broad broad strokes of what's actually going to happen. You've very kindly offered to answer some members' questions, and although we've not recorded this live or not transmitted this live, maybe that's what we'll do in the future, so we can take questions from members specifically, remembering that we can only answer what we can answer with the level of detail what we have.
Yeah. I mean, do remember that this is an evolving process, as much for the government as it is for us trying to interpret it. But one of the good sites in terms, certainly of the furloughed salary side of things, is the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. They've probably got, it's a very simple thing, and if needs be, I can give you the link, Martin. It gives a very good explanation of that. And as I say, I'm sort of looking at sites daily to see if there's any more information coming out, but very happy to sort of answer members' questions, whether that be in a Facebook chat type situation, whether it be live video, whatever's most appropriate. Again, if I can help in any way, I'm more than happy to do that.
No, that's brilliant. We'll definitely schedule it properly, and we'll let all the members know when it's going to be, and Jamie will help us do that. So, John, again, thank you so much. I really do appreciate everything you've done, and I think as it can be, it's kind of good news, and we've just got all to stay positive, and at least, it might be a couple of months before people can get their hands on the money that's been promised, but at least it's coming, and that they know they're not going to be starving.
Absolutely.
John, thank you so much for your time, and we'll hopefully do one of these next week as well.
No problem.